Hey guys, I'm Nathan from Arms and Armor. Today we're going to look at the difference, if any, between a knife and a dagger. Stay tuned. So the other day a customer was asking me why one of our pieces was called a knife and another one was called a dagger, and what the difference was. And in some ways this is confusing to us as moderns because, right, we mostly have knives, even if some knives are for self-defense, right? They're kind of all-purpose tools that you could also fight with if you wanted to, but that's not a dagger, it's a knife. There are some modern daggers, but people usually don't carry them around, and they're illegal to carry around in many places. So when we look at medieval pieces, what's a knife, what's a dagger? Well, I brought an example of a knife, right? So this is the knife from our Bollock dagger set. It is a tool basically for eating, right? This one. There are some knives that are tools, utility tools, for doing a wide variety of work, right? You could fight with this, but that's not really what it's for, right? I think the big distinction between a knife and a dagger in English is that a dagger is for fighting, right? So I'll show you a couple daggers. So this is our Medici dagger, right? It's got a pommel. This is what we would call a sword-hilted dagger because it looks like a miniature sword. It's a category of daggers that were common for a very long time. Even if you look at Bowie knives today, they have hilts on them that protect the hand during fighting, which is what this is for, right? It's just like the crossguard on your sword. It protects you from other blades. It also keeps your hand from sliding down the blade if you stab something or someone. Historically, we don't recommend it, right? So this classic type of dagger has a diamond cross section, right? It has a wooden grip covered with leather that's shrunk on with beeswax, like all of our leather grips are. This is about 1 foot long, and so it's a substantial piece. Could you use this to eat with? You could, but it's not ideal for that, right? Could you use it to chop vegetables? Again, you could, but if you're a cook, you're a chef, you want generally the back of the knife not to be sharp so that you can put your hand on it and chop things, right? This is sharp on both sides because it's meant for stabbing into people, right? And it's not meant really for cutting. You can cut with it, but that's not exactly what it's designed for. So daggers are a weapon, right? They're a weapon first. You can use it for other things. Now, this is our Koln Messer in a fancy sheath. If I pull this, you can see that this Messer, right? Messer means knife in German, and this has a triangular blade section, right? So it's got a thick spine that's flat on the back and it's sharp on one side, but also has this cross, right, with quillins and a pommel on it. And it comes to a very fine point. This knife is also a dagger, right? This is really kind of the ancestor of the Bowie knife, and Bowie knives are fighting knives, right? So what makes this a dagger even though it's called a knife? Well, it's mostly for fighting. It's mostly for fighting, right? You can cut with it, you can thrust with it, you can stab with it. You can also look at, for example, rondel daggers, similar type blade in many cases. Sometimes they're triangular instead of, sometimes they have 3 cutting edges instead of just one. but it's a fighting knife that happens to be called a messer. So if we were looking at kind of medieval categorizations of this knife, even though it's called a knife, a messer, it would have been recognized as a weapon. Right? This is primarily a weapon rather than a tool. So why is it called a knife? Because it's German, right? So messer comes from a different linguistic background. And so that's why there's confusion. I would say that, is this a dagger? Sure, right? It's a fighting knife. It has more in common with a dagger than it does with an eating knife, but that doesn't mean you couldn't eat with it. It doesn't mean people didn't eat with them historically, right? So there's this really good new book that recently came out, The Skein, about Irish fighting knives. You can see how long that knife is. In here it says they should be at least a cubit long, which is 17 to 22 inches, right? So really long knife. And he recounts in here that the Irish, especially in the 16th century, were kind of famous for eating with these giant long fighting knives, and that the English were horrified when they went there and saw people eating with martial weapons, right? That it was essentially super uncivilized to cut your food with a knife that is clearly also a threat. And you're using a weapon to eat your food, which happened sometimes, but it also led to social conflict. Right? It led to people thinking it was inappropriate to do so. So, a knife is a tool that has many uses built into its design. A dagger, I would say, is a weapon that is designed to fight with, that you can use for other things. But if you do use a dagger for normal knife activities, you're likely to find that it's not super well suited to that. And if you do it in public, people are going to see it as kind of weird and potentially even a threat that you're sitting there cutting your steak with a weapon while you're talking to people. Makes them uneasy for some reason. Thanks very much, guys.